Can everyone hear me? Is this too far, too close, too loud, too soft? Just right? Okay, just right. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. On behalf of the Tampa Bay Times, I would like to welcome you all to our 2018 Science Fiction and Fantasy Writing Award presentation. My name is Sue Feathery, and I'm with the Tampa Bay Times newspaper and education program. So we are the arm of the Times that serves teachers, students, and families. We supply newspapers and other educational materials to classrooms throughout Tampa Bay, and all of that is free of charge to students, to teachers, and to schools, to families. This award, I believe we are in the 5th year now. It seeks to recognize and nurture the creativity and talent of the young authors in the Tampa Bay area. We established it to encourage aspiring authors to explore the genres of science fiction and fantasy and to experiment with the short story formats. Frankenstein, the theme of this year's contest. Frankenstein, the novel, explored the intersection of scientific creativity and its moral and ethical consequences. These themes are fundamental to our age of genetic engineering and artificial intelligence. So for this year's writing contest, we invited our high school authors to write original short stories on the theme of Frankenstein's legacy. And I forgot to mention that it is actually the 200th anniversary, 200? 150? 200. Anniversary of the publication of Frankenstein the novel. So this year's contest was co-sponsored by the University of South Florida Humanities Institute and the Bay Area Renaissance Festival. And at this point, I'd like to invite Liz Kickock, who is the director of the University of South Florida Humanities Institute, to say a couple words.
Thank you. This year's entries were judged by a panel that included award-winning science fiction and fantasy authors Theodora Gross, John Kessel, and Rick Wilbur. I'm very pleased to get to welcome Rick Wilbur here today. He's a good friend of mine. I've worked with him for several years. Dr. Wilbur is an award-winning writer, editor, and teacher who has published more than 50 short stories, several novels and short story collections, 4 edited anthologies, a memoir, and a half-dozen college textbooks on writing and mass media. Just overwhelming. It's a lot of work. He is also an administrator and co-founder of the Dell Magazine Award for Undergraduate Excellence in Science Fiction and Fantasy Writing. He is also an attending author today at the Festival of Reading. And earlier today, he discussed his latest short story collection, the Moberg episodes, the Moberg episodes, Alternate Histories of the Ball Player and Spy in Davis Hall. You know, Rick, you know his big baseball. At this point, I'd like to ask him to come up and say a few words on behalf of our judges.
Hi, everyone. The way we work it, I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but the way we work it is we get, I'm sort of the principal judge, I think is my title. Is that right? I have a title?
I believe you have a title.
I'm principal judge. And my job is to get all the stories that I see from Sue down to a few and then send them on to 2 rather more famous authors than I am. So this year it was Theodora Goss, who has a new novel out, Shakespeare-themed work, and it's gotten a lot of praise. And John Kessel, who teaches creative writing at North Carolina State. Theodora, I think, is at Boston College. And he also has a recent novel out that's focused on focused on the whole idea of the fantastic, with talking about the 200th anniversary of Frankenstein. And both of these authors, and I'll let Sue tell you what they had to say, but they were really impressed with the quality of the work they saw. And I will say ahead of time that I'm one of the final 3 judges, and there was a lot of back and forth on trying to figure out 2 and 3 because they were all very, very good. And I will mention that I teach a course in creative writing, in science fiction and fantasy writing at Florida Gulf Coast, down in Fort Myers. I drive down there once a week. And I'm on the faculty at Western Colorado University, working on their MFA, working in their MFA program. That's a genre fiction program, a lot of science fiction and fantasy authors working to get their masters in creative writing. And I'm the co-founder and judge of the Dell Award, where I see hundreds of stories come in from undergraduate and college writers. And so I'm sort of afraid to count up how many stories I might see in a given year, but several hundred short stories of various kinds from college undergraduates and from high school students. And the students from here, the amount of participation and the quality of the writing is really, really impressive. And I mean that it's, I'm trying to say this without saying bad things about some of my college students, but so I'll just say really impressive work. And I want to make sure before we get too far along that you all look up the Dell Magazine's Award for Undergraduate Excellence in Science Fiction and Fantasy Writing. And I expect you, as soon as you're in college, to start submitting stories for that award, which is the most prestigious undergraduate science fiction and fantasy creative writing award in the country, certainly. So welcome, and it's really impressive work, and it's going to be great fun going through this afternoon's exercise in the plaudits that you've learned.
Liz, before we get into the presentations, did you want to say a couple words about the Humanities Institute, or do you want to just do that as part of it?
Oh, it's awesome. Sorry, I guess I should have said it. So we're based at the Tampa campus, but we do actually do programming that's available to not only everyone on all USF campuses, but the entire Tampa Bay community. Everything we do is free and open to the public. Anything that's related to literature, history, ethics, philosophy, languages, anything in the humanities realm, and places where the sciences intersect with those things. We have community book groups, we have film series, we sometimes meet at bars and have colloquia if you are to either bars or colloquia. And so we're always trying to find new ways to sort of engage with our community and bring outstanding USF scholarship to the community and the community to USF. So if you're interested, I'll be around afterwards. Be happy to tell you more about our organization. But if you enjoy something like this today, you would certainly be very welcome and enjoy some of the stuff that we do as well.
Thank you. And I've been to several Humanities Institute events, and they really are very enjoyable. They bring in some great people. Just to kind of add on to what Rick was saying about the judging for this contest is actually a 3-step process. So all the stories that come in are read first by a panel. I want to emphasize that these are blind readings. When you submit your manuscript, you do not put your name on the manuscript. There is one master list that links them, but other than that, all the judges see is a plain manuscript with no author information attached. So it goes to a first panel of readers that is composed of primarily Tampa Bay Times staff. Then it goes on. We choose about 10 stories out of that first group of people. The 10 stories go out to Rick. Rick and his compatriots do the second reading, and then, as he mentioned, the final reading is done by the top 3 judges. So it's quite a process to get through to the end, because we receive a lot of submissions, and there's a lot of quality stories that come in. So we're going to start today by honoring our runners-up. And when I call your name, come on down so that we can give you your certificate and have your photo taken. So the first person that I want to recognize today is our second runner-up, who is Alana Taylor. And her story this year was How to Resurrect Your Fish in 5 Easy Steps. How to resurrect your fish. So let me tell you a little bit about Alana's story. So How to Resurrect Your Fish introduces us to Michelle. Michelle is a very harried scientist and mother who accidentally kills her son's goldfish, Frank, and must resurrect him with humorous consequences. Judge Theodore Goss called this story laugh out loud funny and a fresh, lively, and innovative take on the Frankenstein narrative, and a lot of fun to read. Judge John Kessel said this story amusingly applies the lessons of Frankenstein to the problem of the mortality of goldfish. Warning, resurrecting the fish you won at the fairgrounds does not always work out as planned. And while I have her up here, I would also like to mention that she was an honorable mention in last year's contest for her story, Scallops. Alana attends Sun Lake High School in Pasco County. I believe you are a sophomore this year? Is that junior? You're a junior this year, okay. So please join me in congratulating our second runner-up, Alana. Come on up.
My
Where is
videographer
my
here.
photographer?
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Our first runner-up this year is Olivia Stanley for her thoughtful, untitled story that presents an alternate ending to Shelley's novel. In this story, rather than destroy himself, the creature creates a creature of his own as a companion to join him in his solitude. Judge Theodore Goss said that this story beautifully evokes the creature's anger, despair, and desire for love, and captures the tone and feel of the Gothic original, with dark, lovely imagery and lyrical writing. Mary Shelley would be pleased. Judge John Kessel said, this story affectingly explores the loneliness of the creature in a world that will not accept him, and suggests that even if he were able to create someone who sympathized with the situation, that would not guarantee the end of his alienation. Olivia attends Strawberry Crest High School in Petersburg County. Are you also a junior?
Yes.
Also a junior. Please join me in congratulating our first runner-up. Finally, we would like to recognize this year's grand prize winner. Our 2018 grand prize winner is Graham Hill for his story, To Whom It May Concern. Judge Theodore Goss said, you can wait to come down, or you can come down now, it doesn't matter. Judge Theodore Goss said, in this subtle and elegant story, the themes of Frankenstein are moved to World War I, where an army doctor performs terrible experiments on human subjects who are already wounded by the weapons of war. The narrator is shocked by the doctor's crimes, but fascinated by the man. When he is sent into battle, probably to die himself, he leaves the doctor's research notes as well as his own manuscript for posterity. The narrative is a mediation on the responsibility that accompanies knowledge and on how the desire to know can blind us to ethical considerations. It is also an astute character study of two men, the mad scientist and the shocked narrator, who can't stop listening. Modern counterparts to Frankenstein and Walton in the original novel. So using the cadence of early 20th century prose and specific historical details, the author effectively brings this particular era to life. Judge John Kessel said, I know, Theodore was kind of wordy on that. John Kessel said, this story translates the issues of Frankenstein to the World War I era in France, where a British doctor uses his position in the Allied Expeditionary Force to experiment on the bodies of soldiers slaughtered in the trenches. He's exploiting their deaths in order to discover the secret of life. It's an original take on Shelley's idea and reminds us of the brutal realities of the Great War and its moral consequences. Graham attends Plant High School in Hillsborough County. Please join me in congratulating our 2018 Grand Prize winner, Graham Hill. All right, so we have a couple presentations here. In addition to the prizes that, the prizes that Graham received from the Tampa Bay Times, which is a certificate and $100, he will also receive a class trip to the Bay Area Renaissance Festival. So this is a new sponsor that we had this year. So they were unfortunately not able to join us here today, but we do have a certificate from them. So, and then our other co-sponsor is the USF Humanities Institute, and they have a plaque to present. So I'm So we've asked Graham to just read, I'm not even recording the microphone. We've asked Graham just to read a short, talk about his story, give us a short little idea of himself as an author. And following that, we'll have a short Q&A with all of our student authors here today. And hope you enjoy.
So, as Ms. Better mentioned, I was the winner of this past year's Frankenstein's Legacy Science Fiction Fantasy Award contest. So I just figured I would read the first little bit of that to you today. To whom it may concern, 14th February 1915. If for no other purpose, I am writing simply to record the events of the past few weeks and the strange and horrifying tale of the Englishman Dr. Jack Lowry. But first, for the sake of posterity, I will identify myself before beginning my story. My name is Edward Blanc. I live in a small town of no consequence in the Languedoc. The war does not reach us here. I fear the day that it may. My father has already been conscripted. Doubtless I will be soon as well. I cannot know where to begin. My first experience with Dr. Lowry came months after his own wretched experiences. He came to our town earlier this month and was instantly met with suspicion by all the townsfolk, including myself. Such a remote and unimportant village as ours rarely receives visitors, and foreign visitors are even more noteworthy. Thus, the Englishman's arrival was something of an abnormality, noted and discussed by all. I was in a situation whereby I could become quite close to the man. Only time will tell if this was for better or worse. So since I know we're competing with the Minkies and Ace Atkins in this time slot, I'll keep it short at that. But I'd just like to use my opportunity here to thank a few people. I'd like to thank my parents for always supporting me in these endeavors. My friends for being some of the first people to always hear about my latest crazy idea. Several teachers throughout the years who have helped me. Miss Avery, who's in the back there today. And Mrs. Thomas, Mr. Penn, and Mrs. Victor also all helped in this. And just this wouldn't have been possible without all of them. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we'd like to ask the authors to participate in a little Q&A about their writing process, about these stories, about that. And I'm going to ask Rick to help us facilitate that.
Could we get the authors back up there?
We can.
Please. And for the rest of your writing careers, you're going to be on panels at famous conventions answering questions.
And usually we get chairs.
Right, so I thought this would be good practice for you to get used to the idea that people in the audience and hosts and MCs on panel discussions will be asking you about these kinds of things. So my first question is, and we'll start at this end, and then we'll do the next one the next way. My first question is, tell us about your process. How do you write? How often do you write, and how do you get a story done?
Usually my process for writing a story just involves sitting down for a few hours, working on it and doing that a couple times a day maybe.
Right.
And then just doing that until the story's done.
And how long did it take you to write this piece?
Better part of a week or 2 weeks.
Takes me like 2 months. All right, so that's fabulous. And another question for you then will be the language. Did you read, All Quiet on the Western Front or something? How did you get the language so closely tied to that time and that place?
I think that might just be how I talk. My friends' irritation. Yeah, that was not too difficult.
Well, that's really well done. So creatively? Is it?
Well, I used to write more often, but now I don't really have a lot of time, so I write maybe a story each summer.
All right, great. And your process?
Usually come up with a character and then build a story around the character.
Mm-hmm.
I also draw, so I'll usually like end up sketching some sort of headshot and then I get attached to the character and I'm like, okay, now they have to have a whole story.
And now you have to give them some kind of conflict they have to deal with,
Yeah.
right? Right. All right, and what are your plans for the future when it comes to writing? Do you plan to continue to write? Maybe when you're the rest of your high school days and off into college and then a writing career and fame and fortune? Well, it's never fortune.
I think so. I definitely really enjoy writing. I see something that is going to stick with me for this foreseeable future.
That's great.
I also really enjoy writing. I'll probably just write stories for fun, not really pursue it as a career.
All right,
I actually do want to pursue writing as a career.
great. Anybody interested in that as a major, you know, creative writing or a minor, or, yeah? What interests you the most academically? Is it, it's not writing, is it?
History.
History?
Probably. Yeah.
Great. And so that shows up too,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
comes through in the
How
setting.
much research did you do for this story?
It would be hard to quantify as like dedicated research time, just because the era of history I was studying for fun at that point anyways.
Great.
So,
All right. Terrific. And what's your interest, academic interest?
I love science.
Science? And any particular biology or,
Biology.
yeah, zoology or biology, right, okay. And you're going to be a creative writer.
Yeah.
Great. Do you have any idea, you know, you want to, don't freak out your parents or but do you have plans to, you know, leave the state of Florida, or there's some very good writing programs in the state of Florida?
Oh, that won't freak them out. I want to be an artist and a writer.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Honestly, I'd like to go to Ringling.
Right.
Yeah.
School of Art, yeah, great. You guys have any college goals? You've got to be thinking about it now. What year are you?
I'm junior.
There, and you're a junior.
Yes.
Right, so it's time to be thinking about that, right? All right. And you're still working on, when do you take the ACTs? And you already took them? All right, well, off to college somewhere, right? You're not going to go off in a garret in Manhattan somewhere in a little corner and just write away, you know? You know, going to be an artist and a writer. All right, terrific. Any questions from teachers and parents and friends?
What drew each of the artists to the genre that they write?
Yeah, how often do you write in this genre, in something like fantasy or horror, which is certainly what we're talking about with Frankenstein? Or was that just for this award? Do you really, just for this contest, or do you really write in that kind of material very often? And if not, what do you write in?
Horror is probably like generally the usual thing I write in, but science fiction element of it for this specific contest was sort of new, which I found fun to explore.
Great.
I usually write fantasy stories. I enjoy like taking fairy tales or existing stories and writing them as with a twist of my own. So science fiction was kind of
All right.
Modern sci-fi stories. are my
Modern
favorite.
sci-fi. Do you have favorite authors? Any of you have somebody whose work you admire?
George Orwell.
That's good. So let me give you a couple of hints. You should read work by Theodora Goss, because you should thank her for liking your work so much. That means that your work resonated with her, and so that tells you something. So if you read her work, that might be good for you. And of course, John Kessel, right? And of course, Rick Wilbur.
And of course,
And of course, Rick Wilbur. Although my work is not in this field the way that Kessel and Goss is. All right, any other questions? Those are great questions. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any way where we can read all the story? I mean, I've read Olivia's, obviously, because I'm her mom, but...
very good question, and thank you for prompting me. The winning story will be posted on the story contest website, which is tampabay.com/NIE/story contest. The other stories, the runners-up, will not be posted at this time, but there are plans to make them more widely available in the future. But for now, we're just posting the grand prize winning stories. And you can read the past year's winners as well. So there's really some great work.
And it's a different theme each year.
Yes,
This was
every year is
just
different theme.
too perfect with the 200th anniversary to not do Frankenstein and Mary Shelley. Yeah. All right, yes?
What was the hardest part about writing your story?
Someone else want to take this?
Yeah, let's start at the far end.
Hardest part was actually writing it because I forgot I couldn't find a due date for this contest. And I found out 48 hours before it was due.
Oh my
and this is
goodness.
being wrote for
Oh
like
my
4
goodness.
hours.
And yet here you are, that's fabulous. That's a little scary. Okay.
What was the hardest part?
The hardest part for me is always finishing because I always know where to start. Starting is super easy, and usually I can connect it to the middle, but finding out where it's going to end and how I want to end it is usually the hardest for me.
As a serious answer, probably trying to avoid plagiarizing the story of Frankenstein. And as a joking answer, the website went down about an hour before I was trying to submit it. So Mrs. Avery came in very helpful.
There was an email that I hadn't read until he started panicking, and then I said, oh wait, let me read the email that I have. Oh yes, it says, send it here instead.
All right, great. Other questions? Yes?
When you're writing, at what point do you feel or make the determination that this is the finished product?
Good question. Do you ever know if it's a finished product?
For me, I sort of generally, when starting the story, know how it's going to end. So it's just a matter of connecting the beginning to that point. So just whenever I reach that conclusion.
I usually also try to plan out the end, so I also know where to end, connect it all, or else I'll just keep going forever. And never.
The ending is one of the first things I actually think about.
I do that. I pretty much have the ending in mind, and then I'm working to get there. Yeah. And I have a very brief ending story to tell you. I was reading a story that I wrote 15 years ago, and I was reading it at Western Colorado, where I teach in their MFA program. And I only had 15 minutes to read, and it's like a 25-minute story. And you don't want to rush it, so I knew I would have to quit. And there was a break in the story, and then there's all this denouement, the end of the story comes after that. And I reached the end of the break, and everyone applauded, and I realized, oh my God, that's actually the end of the story. That I've been striving to reach the end that I thought I had, I put too much into that story that really didn't have to be there. So that's a little hint for you, that sometimes years go by and you still come back and you think, oh, this could still be a better story if I only did this, right? Great thing about short stories is you'll get a chance to come back to them later. After they've been in a couple of magazines, and then you're going to put them in your collection, and you get a chance to do them again. Look at them one more time. Thinking ahead. Okay. Yes?
What did your revision process look like? Did you guys show your friends, your family, your teachers? What did that look like?
Not much of a revision process when it's 40 years. All right. Did anybody read it, or did you just hit send and...
I don't think I sent it to anybody. Yeah, I think I just hit send. I was like, okay, this is done. I'm going to put it in Grammarly. Then we're done.
All right.
I had my teacher read it, and I also sent out to some of my friends so they could read it and tell me what they thought.
Yeah. And the comments were okay?
I really
Teacher didn't tear it apart?
No.
Got a lot of red circles and X's and stuff? Okay. I got to tell you, reading these after I'm about to say bad things about the students I deal with. So I won't. But I will say that your copy was really clean, guys. It was really nice. And I'm a red pen person, right? And I wasn't busy with red pens, so I was very impressed with that. All right, and
I had some teachers look at it.
yeah. And were they very helpful? This is where you say yes, they were great.
Of course.
All right. Anyone else? Other questions? Yes.
So I think a lot of writers, particularly who work with science fiction and fantasy, are also into cinema. And so I was curious if there were any movies or TV series or anything that you guys think are really excellent kind of storytelling vehicles.
Science fiction, fantasy, horror, TV that you watch? That you stream? That you watch on your phone?
Guillermo del Toro's Troll Hunters on
Yeah.
Netflix.
Anyone else?
I'm not a big TV watcher.
No?
anybody out here ever watched The Expanse? Yeah. And they were just raving about it, and, you know, I liked it fine, but I didn't like it quite as much as they liked it, but I liked it
Book is
fine.
better, the book is much better.
Yeah, co-authored. Yeah, I know Daniel pretty well, Abraham. Yeah. Okay.
No Game of Thrones fans up here? My goodness.
Game of Thrones? Game of Thrones? No? No? All right, I won't tell George. Okay.
Before
Not-
we,
Not that George would be bothered by that. George is sort of beyond the mundane worries of the rest
I
of
don't
us.
know about that. He said, there was an interview with him the other day, and he said he was actually all stressed out because expectations were so high now.
Yeah.
But, you
Well,
know.
tough break for George. George R.R. Martin is, you could argue, the most successful science fiction author in the country right now because of Game of Thrones and its success on HBO. But he's really paid his dues, and all of us in the business who know him and see him at conferences and conventions are really happy for him because he's no flash in the pan.
He's been publishing since the 70s.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
he worked for it.
he's
Yeah.
really worked hard to get there. So you'll be there someday. They have to really work hard to get there. All right, any other questions?
I do want to get a group photo before.
All right, group
Before we
group
let them
photo.
off the podium.
Congratulate them one more time.